galactic purr of KKs
invites you to Space Cats Happy Hour.
Let your mind relax. We meet in a dimension outside of time,
Where the playfully curious thrive.
So go on, fill your tin cup chalice with the sacred elixir of creativity. Laugh till you breathe violet flame at the theme's absurdity.
and above all, let out your full-throated song with us.
Here at Space Cats Happy Hour, with the galactic purr of KKs.
Boop. Welcome to Space Cats Happy Hour. Trying not to be scattered today because I got a few things to bring to the agenda, which is fun. Also, fun thing, I woke up today, put on my red pants, which was a signal that it was a rest day. But then I was like, I feel like recording the podcast. And I was like, that's so nice. That really means that like recording the podcast for me is like resting and playing and not, at my deepest level, I don't feel like it's work, which is really nice.
Our podcast is totally awesome. I freaking love it. Also, it's April 25th, in case anybody cares what day it is.
Oh, thank you. No, I like that you that. Okay, so what I want to talk about is, we were just talking about it off air. One thing is this a little bit more about the Lemuria Atlantis integration that we've been going through. Then there's also some Atlantis Mintaka overlap, and we've been getting so much Mintaka stuff, so I just want to kind of go into that. And then I wanted to talk with you about the different dimensions a bit, like go through dimensions and how we've been experiencing them, because I've been getting some downloads about that. And then finally, I have some, if there's time, some downloads to share about more like illnesses, neurological stuff, and like cosmically soul journey wise, what they can represent and how like what role they play and why they're like a tool for certain forms.
We're gonna make time for this because these are good downloads. I love them.
There's a lot. Oh, but the first thing, which I think will just kind of like, it's going to be woven through the entire podcast, is just talking about how, I guess I'm a bit jumping ahead, but like the 6D energy of like collaboration and harmony and working together is definitely coming back on. Like it already came online, but it's like coming back in a big way. And I got these messages from the bees about like, especially for those of us who've been in an awakening process for the past like 3 to 5 years, there was a lot of going inward and a lot of like recognizing your own energy and your own energetic boundaries and setting boundaries and having to stop being a people pleaser. And a lot of that stuff involves like navigating conflict and like spending time alone and just being very boundaried. And at least for me, how it played out, like there were relationships that ended, there were relationships that got radically restructured in terms of how they move forward. There were new relationships like yours and mine that started on a new ground with different types of boundaries and different approaches, but it was really intense and you had to kind of focus on what wasn't working between you and other people. And now we're pivoting back from that, which we've been in for years in linear time. So it kind of becomes the new normal, at least for me it did. And we're pivoting back towards connecting with others, collaborating, which is a very different feeling energy of like, you look for common ground, you look for what is working. There's a lot of acceptance of how far you've come on your journey and how far they have, and not expecting them to be, other people or yourself to be perfect. And it's like very, very, it's a big shift. So it's going to take a while for us to become accustomed to it.
Yeah.
And the main thing that the bees transmitted was how nice it is, like a way to support this energy is just to be around there's a lot of bees, like just be around other people and do very gentle things. Like you don't even have to have conversations or whatever. You can just like singing together in a group or just being simultaneously in nature and like both appreciating nature, things like that, where it's like you don't even have to get your mental space involved at all, or any kind of like, I don't know, sometimes conversation involves a lot of negotiation, or it's like you just take that offline and you're just doing really gentle, fun, joyful dancing, silly things like that to like remind you that you can enjoy being in other people's presence, and that it's like it's fun to be a part of
It
the collective.
is. Yeah, that's absolutely important. And I feel like you're exactly right, where we're all kind of we're being asked to come out of the hibernation / hermit mode and actually start the collaborations. And it can be like taking our time for it. It's like we do feel the urgency, and we've been feeling the urgency for so long, because that 60 energy, which was the collaboration and creation and all that stuff, it was like it came online first, but then we like went into the 70 integration, which I'm sure you're going to get into, which is, so it was like the stop start of like, I know I'm supposed to do something, but what the fuck is it? Because like nothing's working, or I can't have ideas, or anyway, all this stuff. And we were meant to be in isolation figuring out all this stuff, and now it's like gently take your time and figure out the frequencies that work for you, and enjoy people again, which
I mean, I noticed that you, like, basically when you changed locations, I already noticed it immediately with you, that you suddenly were physically interacting with a lot more people, even though it might not feel that way to you. Like,
yeah, actually, you're right.
you would be, there was this person like working with you on your land, and then other friends that you would go like see nearby and stuff like that. Yeah, but like it was a big shift.
It is a big shift. Yeah.
And that was really, it was just cool to see that. Like, I felt like you were already doing it, and I've been watching you do it, and it's been nice.
I love you.
Because it was kind of coinciding with my big end of integration period, which actually involved like going even more into hermit and like ending more relationships. So I felt like I was going, like in that period, I was going even more down a more solitary path. So it was nice to see you begin the process of like reconnecting with people in real time, in
like enjoyable, easy, we're just going out for coffee, or someone's making dinner, or we're just watching TV and getting high, and or whatever,
or even
no
literally like you and this woman that work together, you're like literally like working side by side on things, literal collaboration energy, but just in a very low-key, super chill way.
Yeah,
really
I even remarked to her how fun it was to work with her, because it was like working with my grandfather growing up, except without the assholery. And so she has this wonderful like leadership presence, where she's like, she knows what she's doing, and if she doesn't know what she's doing, she figures it out, and there's no freaking out like, oh my God, something went wrong. It's like, oh, well, that didn't work, let's see what does work. And it's like, oh, the soothing to my nervous system energy that is really a change from the old stories, and I'm very grateful for that. Thanks for pointing that out. It's good to.
That's so nice. Your grandfather's energy is really present.
Yeah, it's interesting, because you were the first one to give me a message from him. I didn't even, I had still been in the old stories of like, he was didn't really enjoy his energy towards the end of his existence. He was just such a dick. But I had been close with him growing up. Like I loved being around him. And so, but I like the sour taste in my mouth of his, just gross at the end. And now basically he's here with me as a very strong ancestral presence, and healing that, that masculine energy wound and all the things that are happening. And then like, he was kind of a leader in the community, and he's guiding me to do the same thing, but in my own way. And it's very, very interesting, because I did not see that coming.
It's so cool.
It is cool.
With our mirroring that we always do, I've been steeped in grandmother energy along my journey as well, and like reconnecting with that part of my feminine energy, which has been nice.
So nice.
I think it actually makes more sense to go from this into the dimensions. But just before we do, I will say, so because like the end of my integration period was like severing so many ties or doing so much hermiting, and so much of my integration journey was like seeing my own patterns mirrored in other people, in what they would do that would trigger me, and then like recognizing it as an aspect of me. But then like it involved a lot of looping, like looping on the same story. Like I would see people in my life and it would just be the same looping story over and over again. And to be completely honest, I feel like I'm still in the process of letting that go and learning to trust again in relationships, and like be open to being surprised. And like, I think I got to a place, it was just because things in my reality happened so on the nose and so constant, the mirroring, that it was a bit much with like the looping. I'm sure there's other people also who experience it. It's a lot when you like, every time you have the conversation with somebody, it's like it goes down the exact same conversational path and you're just like you're like, how do I break this cycle? So yeah, in terms of opening myself up, I think that's like really a goal that I've set for myself. I actually have set it for myself and like written it down and put intention behind it, just to like open my energy up more and be open to connections, any kind of connection. Yeah, just finding newness. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say, I remember I went through, so there's a part of this where there are people who go on their spiritual journey and literally just start a new life because they changed so much that it's just not possible for them to stay in relation with the people in their lives. But that is not, for the most part, my path. And I think it's the Archangel Camuel stuff, where it's like about the focus of that archangel is like really strengthening relationships and building like healthy relationships and stuff that you and I have in our names with our Ka. And so after this B transmission came in, that was like, you know, you got to focus more on what is working. I went through a bit of like an inner reckoning, and I was like realizing a lot of what I do is I'll tell an old story because I think the other person, it will help them relate to me more. And I'm scared of losing them. And I'm scared of losing that connection that we had with where we bonded over whatever, a story that for me now is an old story that's not really useful for me anymore. And so I'll tell it again to keep that connection. And then I'll come away feeling bad because it's an old story that I don't really want to tell anymore. And it was really like allowing room for like grieving around that, where it's like, yeah, the people that are still in your life that maybe don't, like, you don't have all the same connection points with them anymore. And you have to allow yourself to grieve certain connection points that have been lost. And so that you can accept that, and you can just accept, it's like, yeah, it's better to just not bring up those topics and not go down those conversational paths. And that is like a loss of kind, even though it's like change and transformation and stuff. So I was just going through that like over the past 48 hours, where I was like, some people that are like really close with me in my life. And I was like finding myself playing out those old stories with them again and getting all stressed out over the old stories. And I'm like, I don't believe in these old things anymore. And I'm just doing this because it's familiar to have this kind of conversation.
This is interesting Mercury retrograde talk here, where you're reviewing all the old stories. God, yes.
Me who said, I think I did my Mercury retrograde in advance. And like 2 days later, I was like, I'm doing my stupid Mercury retrograde review. But it was like, and it was like, because for me, sometimes I can be all or nothing with my attachment system, can be very all or nothing. So I get so triggered when there's like a change or a loss, and then my brain interprets that as meaning, oh, we're not going to be able to be friends at all because now like we don't have this in common. And literally the bees were like, but like, what do you still enjoy? What are the things that where are your commonalities? You don't have to cut and run from every single relationship. You can still, enjoy your time. Anyway, so that was very much coming through.
Very helpful messages for sure. Thank you, bees.
Okay, so here's what I was thinking about the dimensions.
Okay.
What I wanted to do was just quickly talk a little bit about what you brought up before with how they came online and how it was super intense, but then I want to go through the dimensions with you and see how each one, how you perceive and how I perceive and how we feel through them, because I think that'll be interesting. Yeah. So basically, some of this is like, if you've ever listened to Jessa Reed's old podcast, it's just me recapping an old podcast of her where she went through the dimensions, and some of it overlaps where it was like very helpful. And I was like, yes, that is how I feel the dimensions too. but, or D, whatever, dimensions, densities, whatever the D stands for.
Yeah.
But so it's like, okay, we've got 3D where it's like your sensory organs tell you what 3D existence is. 4D was like the mental space coming online. The internet had a lot to do with that, feeling mentally connected to the collective and like being able to tap into that. And that was like, I don't know, I feel like for me personally, I perceived it more around, she said 2012, but for me, I started to notice it more 2010, 11.
That makes sense to me. Yeah. 2008 feels like a mark year. What is it? A remarkable,
Yes.
milestone year. That's what
Milestone. 2008. That's interesting. Yeah. And then what happened was in quick succession, at least for me, I think for some people, 5D was like more maybe 2017. And I think I was feeling it, but like it really amped up 2019. And that was like being emotionally connected and being able to tap into a clearer sense of your perception of other people's emotions. So you could tell if somebody was talking to you, you're like, that doesn't feel authentic, or kind of being able to see behind the scenes and feeling very emotionally connected, and like your empathy went into super overdrive. 6D being this very collaborative, creative sharing. That's the one too that I've heard described before, where it's like you just activate each other. So it's like, oh, I have this skill and now you've just been around me. So now you have this skill too, just by just being in the presence of it. It reminded you of how you also know how to do that. And you don't have to like learn, you can just do like, and so that was like 2020 maybe, but it was like a very short window. And then 70. Which was like our connection to the earth grid, and it had a very big feminine component of it that was very dense. And that was the thing that a lot of us felt. Spring 2021 was like crash. We all were like, why am I so tired? Why I was on this huge awakening trajectory and now I just feel like wiped. And it was very, very heavy. So, but if you think of how quick that happened, right?
Yeah.
Like we were still integrating 4 and 5 and 6, and then 7 came, and it was like, so I think that's what I was just realizing was how intense that was, because 6 is coming online again. And it's like 7 and 5 combined, I think, kind of fried, and 4 and 5 and 7 just like fried our nervous systems. It was like a lot of overstimulation. It was like, whoa. It's like, yeah, no wonder we've all been feeling completely fried.
Yeah.
So that was just my perception of it recently, was just how intense it was. And that's like why so many people are like in burnout or feeling aspects of burnout and stuff, and having trouble connecting to parts of their spirituality that came in easily before, but then have to contend with all these other layers and like input. And now it's like, whoa, it feels so much harder to access like this part or that part.
Yeah, I feel like you pretty much nailed it. 2017 felt like a pretty big shift of something. I don't know if that's when the 5D started coming in.
Yeah.
As far as like, I don't know, but it was a
there are
shift.
people whose big awakening, like they're like a generation behind us, and it was 2017 as opposed to you and me who are more 2019, 2020.
Yeah. I was definitely in my dark nights of the soul in those years. So
Yeah.
I knew a shift had happened, but only.
Which I think was also all this stuff coming online, being able to like suddenly like all our receptors were open and functioning, and it was like, whoa.
It was a lot. I did not feel good. Whoo boy, being unaware of what was happening. I just thought I was suicidal, which I was. I mean, that's also true, but it was just like, and I think the feeling of the nervous system burnout, I can't tell, like, yes, it was overstimulating to my nervous system when that 7D came online in 2021, but also I feel like it was more, I was finally in tune with my nervous system and how burned out it was. And I wasn't allowed anymore. Like my body would not allow me to continue on the adrenaline rush of just get through shit. It was like, you have to heal this. We're literally burnt out. And it was the parasympathetic nervous system that was coming online as far as like the resting and the receiving, that feminine side. And we'd all been like so hard in the masculine channel of got to get this done, like capitalism, like all that stuff that we now know is just, that's what 2020 was. It felt like the start of the karmic washing machine of the death of that toxic masculine, where we all had to reevaluate a lot of shit and in a very condensed amount of time. And it was 2021 was the worst year of my life, I think. And I've had some pretty rough years, like not the 2022 was better. It wasn't great still, but it was definitely better than 2021. 2021 took me the fuck out. And I know for other people, it was, 2020 was the worst year of their life, or 2022 was. We all have those different milestones, but yeah, it's,
You
I think
made
you
a
nailed
good
it.
point about 7D and the body energy, because it was like you're in a physical body.
Mhm.
You have to pay attention to your physical body right now.
Yeah, and that was year 2021 was the year that I really went hardcore on a clean-ish diet. Like because I was feeling so bad for so long, and I knew certain foods weren't great for me, but I still wasn't cutting them out. And anyway, for some reason 2021, it was like, you're going to do this. And I don't know necessarily that it was a mental decision. Some of it I think was, but part of it also was just like, you got to do something drastically different because this isn't working. And I noticed it the first time when I went out for, like, I think I had 2 drinks, like 2 tequila and sodas or some shit like that, like not very much compared to what I've been able to drink in the past. And I was wrecked. Like I wasn't hungover. I wasn't even drunk. My body was like, what the fuck did you just put? And my heart was racing and I couldn't sleep. And I was like, well, I guess I should maybe trying to cut out, whatever the sugar is, like the alcohol, the sugar, and I knew the gluten was probably an intolerance of some sort. So I just went hardcore into just exploring, like, okay, what is it like to not eat sugar and not eat refined sugar? Like I would still have maple syrup, and I really have a sweet tooth. So I definitely allowed myself to have sweet things. But like, that's when I first started realizing that I felt better after not having a shitload of pasta or bread or whatever. And just kind of, it took me a long time. I'm still getting used to gluten-free things like crackers and pizza and stuff like that, because it's not the same at all, but I definitely feel better eating them than I do when I allow myself a little treat of like, oh, I'll have a regular donut this time, or and I don't mind doing those things. I'm not going to cut myself off from all enjoyments, but like until we get a gluten-free donut shop in this town, I'm gonna every so often just have a regular donut. Anyway, my point is, like, yeah, definitely body stuff came online for me hardcore in 2021.
Yeah. 4D, what did 4D feel? Okay. Yeah. What did 4D feel like to you?
I honestly don't even know if I was really aware of 4D because I I identify with my mental space so much, or I have for so much of my life, that it kind of, I'm not sure I noticed a change other than I kind of feel like what was happening was I was maybe starting to become aware that I did have an intuition that I could listen to, but that I wasn't always or rarely or whatever. And it wasn't like a thing I can even really explain, or even I would not have been able to explain it at the time either, but I'm just trying to look back on it and be like, what was I doing? And I think it was like, I could tell what people were thinking and doing. Like I could feel the truth behind what they weren't saying or what they weren't doing. But because I was so in my mental space, I was like, okay, surely I'm wrong, or second guessing, or whatever it was. It was very much like a toe in the water of, there was an awareness that I had 2 operating systems, the mental space and the intuition. And again, I would not have
That's
been
so
able to put that into words at the time, but I think that's what was happening during those years.
That's very interesting. I was not clued into my intuition. For me, what 4D felt like was I had been around 1996, 97 through the 2000s, very politicized from first my mom and my background. And like my mom and I had like a feminist reading group, consciousness raising group in our town and stuff. And then I went to, in the early 2000s, went to study, and it was like all very left-wing at the time, radical stuff of like learning about like capitalism, colonialism, trans and queer stuff, all that stuff. I was like immersed in that, and it was extremely fringe. It was extremely fringe, and you kind of, if you went into the normal world, like it was very hard to talk to people about it, or have like, it was just like so not part of the conversation. And there was like active backlash from like blah, blah, blah. And then I was like working in an environment that was very politicized. So I was surrounded by people, but it's like, it was like a bubble, you know? And then outside that bubble was like, nobody knew what the fuck you were talking about.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, you're right, it was like the internet in 2008 and 2009. And then it was like suddenly around 2010, 2011, I was like, everybody's starting to talk about the things that like only me and my women's studies people would ever like, using terminology, or the people that I worked with at my very left-wing organization, people were using these terms suddenly, and it just like was like growing exponentially, and then it burst out everywhere online, and Tumblr and Twitter, and it was just like, and it was just like watching it happen in real time was crazy. I was like, whoa, this went from being in circulating in the collective consciousness in a very small number of beings' brains to
Everywhere.
just, it was like everybody downloaded the information and was all up to speed on like everything. And that's how 4D felt to me. And I experienced very much through being online. Like there were times when I was like very active on Twitter and stuff, and I would just watch conversations happen, and then like the response, and then the response to the response, and it was very overwhelming. But it was just like it was like watching something evolve in real time, and like all of that stuff, which was really, really,
that's cool. Trippy. Cool.
And then kept peaking, and like, and then I think also 4D, I mean, there were things like with dreams and stuff, or like telepathy. Like I know I've like felt a strong telepathic connection with Mike from like ages ago and stuff, but I think that was 4D stuff.
That's so cool.
Yeah, just like those types of like that kind of stuff as well. 5D feels a bit murkier to me. I don't know. How do you feel? Oh no, I remember how I feel 5D. Anyway, you go.
Yeah, that's so I think 5D was coming online about the time I was having my dark nights of the soul, and I just was so out of it that you're right. It does feel really murky because everything was too overstimulating. I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't really read books. I still can't really read books or listen to music, but I'm starting to get back into it. But I was just very like carefully moving through each day, just like what is going to overstimulate me today, just kind of hiding under a blanket kind of feeling. And it was also the first time, I think it was in, what year was it, that I identified the first time I could taste a lie. But again, this is before I was awakened, so I didn't know that, I wouldn't have explained it that way, but I sort of could. I was renting an apartment from someone, and the property manager, she was a lie, a literal just lied all the time, and I could feel the ashiness of her words, and I was like, what is this? But again, I was very I just felt so bad. And so I was definitely integrating, even at that time, I was integrating a lot of the feminine energy, like the hopelessness, the despair, all that stuff we were all dealing with in 2021, 2022, or whatever it was, like that feminine energy coming through. I was like, nothing mattered. I did not give a shit about anything. I was like cut off. I didn't want to hang out with people, and I didn't care that I didn't want to hang out with people. I would say things like that I would never think of saying before, like honestly wise, not in a shitty, well, it came to me, it was like, my old self would have judged it as being shitty, but like it was just honesty instead of people pleasing. And I would just be like, no, when I didn't want to do something, instead of being like, well, I have this thing, and like trying to have a big backstory or whatever. Anyway, I think that's kind of what 5D was feeling like a little bit to me, as far as I can really remember. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember. So it's like part of it. So in the spring of 2019, which was just before I had the part of my awakening, which was like, you're everything, you're God, consciousness, like reality is completely filled. That part, it was leading up to that. I feel like that's when 5D really came online. And what it was my whole life, I had been super sensitive to and tuned into other people's emotions, but like disassociated from it and unaware of it and unaware of how it
Yeah.
affected me.
Yeah.
And I suddenly became aware, and it was through this close friendship where this friend was just going through a lot of external, really heavy stuff related to fear and death and dying and illness and stuff. And then her mom, on top of everything else that she was dealing with, her mom got diagnosed with cancer. And I would have a conversation with her and I would barely be able to keep it together. And I was having like panic attacks. And I was like, and I just kept saying, I was like, this doesn't feel right. Like I was like, this is your mom. This isn't my mom. Like I shouldn't be feeling this intensely. And it was that awareness of like, whoa. And there's an interesting added dynamic to that, which I think is my human design, where I'm like very open, and like we had a specific pairing where she had a closed thing where I had it open. So her emotions would blast out even more potently. And I was a big open receptor. So I think it was like a very big cue to way of seeing it. It's like, here, this is what we're trying to, and that was, so there was now there was an awareness, although not necessarily a sense of what to do about it.
Right.
But just like, whoa, I am very affected by the emotions of the collective. And then also for getting, more in tune with my own emotions that I was disassociated from or just had trouble identifying and perceiving. And I perceived them all as just anxiety or uncomfortable energy, but it was like, there were like deep emotions behind that weren't moving through that kind of stuff. There was a lot of physical symptoms for me of like, I had so many things flaring up during that period. Like all parts of my body were just like, of like emotions that wanted to be felt and allowed to move through. And we're just getting like, kind of stuffed down under constant anxiety and dread. And so there was a lot of physical stuff.
I think that was I'm glad you brought up the emotions and the boundaries type stuff. Or for me, I put up really, and it was involuntarily so that my body did this, or it was like I had no choice, but I didn't realize it. It was just like, I remember thinking during this time period that it was like, I had to let people be in their own shit, but I wasn't consciously logically thinking of it like that. I was just like, I shut down and I couldn't talk to people because that was the only way that my body knew to like get me away from taking on other people's emotions. And it was just like, I literally physically couldn't.
Like these are things again that I want to talk about how valid they are. Like we talk about avoided behaviors, and there's a lot of bullshit around the world avoided in so many ways. And it's like, no, these are like necessary survival strategies while you're learning about yourself, and also in a collective that doesn't understand boundaries at all and is like not respectful of emotional and energetic boundaries. Avoidant is just like what you have to do to survive in a lot of situations. It's funny, I remember you telling me about like you learning that lesson, but I did not learn. I was like, I was having a huge crisis of self-worth from my dark night of the soul. And so I kept throwing myself at other people's problems and their emotions, and like doing a lot of fixer stuff and all that baggage, and like trying to, not over that, some of it had good outcomes too. I don't want to just shit on myself. There were good things that came of it, but like just relentlessly throwing at myself at the same thing. And then I would just not function in my daily life. So I would like go be in a really emotionally intense situation with another person, and then like spend the next month recovering and like falling behind on my stuff, and then freaking out about falling behind on my
Yeah, absolutely. I was there too, for sure. And I'm still kind of working through, because sometimes I still feel like I've taken on some of the emotional stuff, but but that happened, throughout the 2020, 2022 stuff. And then I was like, nope. And I kind of just keep dancing back and forth between like, this is not mine, or whatever I need to tell myself to keep myself in. And also I wasn't yet aware of it, but just the waves of emotion that hit like you just like move through waves of emotion that aren't even anybody's in particular, and you don't know when you feel it as your own, which is still, that takes quite a time to get to know like what's not, when you just get hit with stuff out of nowhere. And you have to be like, is this me? But I had no clue back then. So I was getting hit with all sorts of stuff I'd been like bombarded with all sorts of stuff. Now I'm just realizing as we say this, I'm like, oh, that's why 6D was so cool, because of that activating thing. 6D was very magical. Like it was like the gifts of being tuned in
of being able to like suddenly psychically connect with another person and like tune into their guides and being able to give them a nice message, or them to you, and hearing about an ability and then suddenly being like, oh, I have that too, or like receiving energy healing, and then I was like, oh, I can do energy, like that was like, and I'm very grateful that I heard somewhere early on that that was a thing, and it kind of planted the seed in my brain, so it made me very open to it. So there was that aspect, because I've been thinking about it more as like literal collaboration and connection, but it was also in this energetic space.
That's a good point.
It's just making me realize like late 2019 and into 2020, there was a year where I was flying high on all of that stuff and just like getting messages and all sort, like that was like the 60 I loved. I loved the 60. It was so nice. And then in a more literal sense, connecting with you and Pearl and like building a new group together, and a new collaborative group and a new friendship group, and working through and like being so open and having other people where you could just say like, this is how I am and this is what I'm working through, and like that was incredible too. I felt like
So
that was like
incredible,
a beautiful gift.
Oof.
And I think I was just a bit muddled in my head because I thought this, I always like to simplify. My brain wants the shortcut. So it's like, okay, we want to apply the same lesson across the board. So I thought it was going to happen with all my relationships. And then it was like, no, there's other relationships where the lesson is going to be that you need to give more space, or like you're not in the same headspace and you've got to just accept that and like go from there. But having that was like incredible.
That is pretty fun. Yeah.
And that was, we started to connect in 2020 online virtually. And then it was 2021 when we finally met up in the fall. So that one like was actually carrying over quite a long time. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. I remember us talking about 7D energies in some of our earlier episodes. We were like, holy shit, this divine feminine energy coming through. And we were like fried.
Yeah, there was also so many, I mean, because there was also like a death of, I call it like a dark masculine, or like I like even dark is so loaded.
I know,
but like like a divine destructive masculine and a divine destructive feminine is I guess the terms I'll use. But there was a big death of a certain divine destructive masculine that was happening at the same time as these other Ds were coming online. So it was like a lot of overlap of things piled on top of things. So 2020, the beginning was like so intense because that was also happening. And so it was like super intense emotions percolating around that we had to deal with in 2020. And then 2021, it was the feminine version. So it was like super intense stuff that came with
so
that.
much rage.
Yeah. You know, I don't even think I've even with all of my work that I've done and knowing how much of a masculine energy I hold personally, and all the work that I did over my reckoning to like really see masculinity from a much more neutral and compassionate and accepting place, I still just realized that we talk about that 7D energy and feminine, and I tend to talk about like earth energy is very feminine, but it's like I think
she has both.
Yeah, she told like everything has both. And I think I've been focusing on that, like the way, which is the green giant, of course. He's like a nice, very masculine earth energy. But anyway, I just realized as I was saying, I was like, oh, I'm always saying like, whenever I say the earth, and I'll always say like feminine, and like that, I should stop doing that because I'm sure that is not good for me internally. Like be like blocking off the masculine connection to earth energy.
It's funny that you say that because I was just thinking about that for the sun too, or I keep thinking of it as a masculine entity, which it is, but also it has divine feminine. I feel like the earth and sun mirror each other, where like the earth is like maybe whatever majority, I don't know what the word, it's like the yin and yang symbols where like the yin, the earth energy has that dot of divine masculine, which it doesn't mean it's small or whatever. It just means like it's contained in there. And then the sun is the opposite, where it's like the yang energy, but with that same little dot of feminine. And I was like, oh, wow, the feminine energy of the sun, that is really delicious. I did not put that together until quite recently. And it was a really nice download and feeling.
Yeah, totally. And just like, I just remember even beyond just the feminine part, I just remember when I did the first Mintaka Island healing session, the sun came on in a very masculine way. And it was such a nurturing energy. And I was like, we just don't talk about the nurturingness of like masculinity in and of itself enough. And it was so nice and so gentle. And it was like to connect with like nurturing masculine energy. Anyway, it was very healing for me personally. It was like
me too. Oh, that was really magical. That opened so many doors. And I kept getting annoyed at myself that I wasn't moving faster and healing it faster, but it just took the time that it takes. And only like this year, late last year / early this year, I just was like really feeling at a deep, deep level the nurturing masculine energy because of this original stuff that you would do with like the Mintaka healing sessions and stuff. And I was a part of that. And it was such a nice, like, just open the door to that. You know, what if it can be nurturing and awesome, even though part of me was like, no, it can't. It's like, no, those parts can die and be fertilizer for the new stories. But you did really valuable work for me, for a lot of people, but like, I particularly really appreciated that.
That's very nice. Yeah, so that I'm just realizing too, that earth energy. So that earth energy of being connected, which one of the ways that I feel it is stuff that I'd kind of suppressed just to survive, but it was very, when I was in my teens, it was very powerful. I was like I went down the path of, you know, animal liberation, animal rights, but it made me, seeing what was happening traumatized me so deeply. It was like too upsetting and too traumatic. And I kind of had to like squelch it down. But that is a big part. I'll just get so overwhelmed by any stories where there's like any animal suffering or like it's environmental stuff. So that's another reason why it's so important to tune out the news, because it's like we're not at the point where we need to learn about this stuff anymore. I mean, you know, maybe some of us in some ways are still doing, but like the most of us, like we're very aware of the issues that the earth faces and that we face as a species and that all that stuff. It's like, we don't need to keep staring at it. We need to be focused on getting ourselves into a place of like inner harmony and peace so that we can spread that out to the collective. And not just keep like staring and re-traumatizing ourselves. But that's definitely a big aspect that's come back, where I'm like so hypersensitized to animals and nature. I mean, in a nice way, like super connected as well. And then the cycles of life and death, I think, was a big part of it, because that's such a earth thing. And even my feeling is, as trippy as earth is going to get, and the future of our species and its relationship to earth, and how I think longevity is going to change and a lot of stuff is going to change. There's a reason that earth has those cycles of death and transformation. And so some version of them is still going to be present. And so they just kept presenting themselves to me to be accepted and loved. And I kept pushing them away because I was like, wait, but I'm learning all these things. And if miracles are possible, like, why wouldn't we just avoid the suffering of this and that? And so a lot of that has to do with illness, death, decay. And so that was a big part of my 2021 and that 70 earth energy. And I finally, this year, when a similar sort of cycle, so it was again, my friend whose mom eventually passed away, and she passed away in 2021. And then there's a similar thing happening with a further removed, but someone I know's husband and stuff. And I was kind of starting to go down the same path. And then I was like, wait. And I finally saw it. I was like, no, it's like your dream helped too. Your dream where there was a woman with lupus and it was like a lot of abundance and stuff. It's like, again, being able to accept those aspects of the cycles of transformation and stuff, and accept that they can take these forms that currently involves quite a bit of suffering, but like new offshoots grow from that, and things evolve, and offshoots come from all sorts of situations. And if you're just always trying to stop the path from going, then you're not going to get to see those offshoots and the gifts that they bring and stuff. So that was a big one for 7D, that I feel like I'm fine. And it's very peaceful feeling inside to finally just stop fighting death.
Yeah. I feel like the episode where you talked about what if we're already dead, I feel like that is a good, if you haven't listened to that yet, go back and listen to it, because it's real good. And it's really uplifting. It's so crazy how death can just be such an uplifting topic. And I think that we were really, especially because earlier in this episode, you were talking about the grieving of like what was, or the you that used to be, or whatever. And I'm like, we've been in such a phase of that where it's like we're grieving the things that we were, which is good. I mean, like, it's an honor, you know, to have those parts of us and honor their passing or whatever, but celebrate the joy that comes through the transformation of it. And that's the Scorpio Taurus, the nodal axis that we're in currently. We've been in it since 2022, and it just feels like we've reached a whole big healthier place of that right now, which makes sense because we've been in the nodal axis for all this stuff, like for heavily focused on it for a while. And it also made me think about the mushrooms that are coming online so hard right now, because like I'm feeling so connected to mushroom energy. It's like crazy. I mean, and I know a
You're
lot
part
of us,
mushroom. You're
My
definitely
what?
a mushroom. You're part mushroom. You're definitely a mushroom ambassador.
I love that you fucking said that. I'm serious, because I just was like 2 days ago, I was like, I think I'm a mushroom ambassador. I literally said those words, but I didn't like tell anyone because I didn't want to, you know, sound pretentious or whatever. But I was like, but like the work that Paul Stamets is doing, he's a literal mushroom spirit, like ambassador. Like he's like leading the way for a lot of us. And there's tons of people out there who are doing this. And mushrooms are, we're not supposed to. Sometimes I get hung up on like, but I want to be special. I want to be the only one or one of the few. Like my Aquarius son is like, oh, it's cool before anyone else did it. I was cool before they. Anyway, but part of me is just like, no, it needs to spread, like that consciousness. It's an alien consciousness. It's like there's an intelligence to it, and this consciousness that just is in favor of life, also death, because life comes from death. You know, it's just like this really cool message that's really like this compassionate, just neutral, but like very loving, supportive energy. And it can do so much for us. And I was like sitting there a couple of days ago just thinking about how much I love mushrooms and how cool they are, and how I don't know enough about them at all, but I feel like that's what's coming through for me now, which is partly why a lot of the Paul Stamets lectures and documentaries and all this, it's coming into my awareness like super hardcore right now. And I even, my friend Allie, I make this thing called Bitches Brew, and it has mushroom coffee in it or whatever. And I let her have a cup one time because she was like, I don't know if I want it, but anyway, she tried it. She's like, this is delicious. Would you make me some? And I was like, maybe this is partly how I do my mushroom ambassadorship, is like make people bitches brew with like mushroom coffee and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'll do all the things, and like maybe do some journeying with them. Like because people are scared of mushrooms. Like clearly The Last of Us is showing us like we're afraid of mushrooms, and that's fine. Like we need to work through those fears.
The Last of Us, yeah.
but which I haven't even seen or played the game, even though I have both. But anyway, but yeah, like especially the thing with me doing all this trash goddess stuff. Like I don't even know if I mentioned it on the podcast, but twice now I've gone out and like being paid to pick up trash at this person's house that's been abandoned for like 10 years or whatever. So there's a lot of trash to pick up. And I was like, what if I'm really doing trash goddess stuff here? Like I'm here to revamp the trash services or whatever. And whatever part I'm supposed to be taking part of that, working with mushrooms that can literally eat plastic and all the shit in the landfills that we don't know what to do with. And I'm just like, yes, I will do that. And anyone who's scared of mushrooms, who wants to try a sacred journey, I can do that as well. And I practice with you, and like, I know I can do it. And anyway, it's just a really cool consciousness that is tied into all
I
this
think
stuff.
literally it's like that movie is so funny because it's like, what if the mushrooms colonize everyone's brains and turn us into zombies? It's like, well, we've already reached the tipping point, and the mushrooms have already affected our consciousness, and it's already affecting us, and it's just making us like happier and more connected and like better. It's just but it's like, what if it was the worst thing in the world? And it's like, well, it's already happened and it's fine. It's actually really good, and it's like helping people with their depression and their all sorts of things, and helping like creative innovation and all sorts of magical stuff.
Yep. 100,000%.
It's funny with the death thing, because I was realizing, I think I talked about that when I was talking about my powers coming online and like having the healing powers, and then having that friend's mom die despite the efforts and stuff. And I realized the way I talked about it, it wasn't like super accurate about how I actually felt, because I actually felt quite peaceful even when I saw the pivot coming, and I was like, ooh, I feel like a lot of my fears for other people around actual death had been like so assuaged by what my initial spiritual awakening, where it was like, everything's everything, like you're definitely still able to communicate and like all this stuff. And it just like really hit home, and it like really anchored in. And I was like, yes. And it was really the suffering part that I was still having trouble, and the loss of the physical, like that part, that grief, more on behalf of my friend. But like, I think for me, like it was like triggering like memories of having experienced it in other incarnations and synchronization and stuff, and like anticipating and stuff. And it's like that part that's still, and I also lost my kitty in 2022.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I keep thinking we're 1 year after 2021. I've been talking this whole
I
conversation.
know.
So it was just 1 year. That's trippy.
I was doing the same thing. That is trippy. What the fuck?
Yeah, time is weird.
It is so weird.
That 2020, that 70 energy really played with time in
It's
a
a
big way.
ride.
But
It's a
like, I
ride.
just so physically miss her like
Mhm.
holding her specific body and what her specific, like that kind of stuff, where it's still like those things I think are still working through. But
Yeah, for sure. And
I
that's
actually like can't even describe the piece that the progress I've already made around my relationship to death of where it used to be. So I had a lot of death in my family. I have a lot of family members who died young, or there's a lot of cancer that like went the fatal route. And I was holding so much fear, and I'm so grateful for how much of that was cleared out.
Do you want to talk about the diseases? It feels like
Yes.
this might tie into it, because your downloads were blowing my mind.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, but before, okay, I do want to talk
yeah.
about the dimensions, but I just want to say the final thing about the dimensions was that 8D, which I think I've heard a few people describe 8D in different ways. I've heard one description where it was like it's very supernatural, and that's where you're like talking to aliens or like whatever. That was Jessa, like she was saying this, where I talk to my alien guides and I can sometimes see them and like trippy stuff like that. And also talking about how like literally like in terms of the evolution of the species, 8D is like the last one where you can actually hold yourself in a physical form, and after that you kind of just disperse more, which is interesting. But what I hadn't realized was you and I had been, again, with our being a bit ahead of schedule last year in the spring.
Oh God.
When we were fully immersed in 7 and 6 and 5 still. We're like, how about we bring something else to the mix? We're not burnt out enough. And we did a journey together, and it was like this purple, black, raveny bird, and like all this stuff came on. Anyway, it was total AD energy, which is, it has a huge trickster component, and trickster can be very triggering for us because it is so kind of neutral to the point where it doesn't care as much as we care about pain.
It feels
and suffering.
cruel sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, it can feel cruel, or it can just feel very, like I went on a journey lately where I was fully just cycling, like it was between sleep and wake period, and I just went with it, and I was like fully seeing in the trickster dimension, and like it's just a lot of creatures and entities and beings that have a very neutral face, and they don't convey a lot of warmth, and they're just kind of like, I'm here, I exist, I'm interesting to look at. You're like, what?
Yeah.
So, and that's just part of the trickster realm. The trickster goes across the spectrum, but 8D is where it's really good to have a foundation of neutrality within, of what I like to call cosmic or compassionate neutrality, so that you can tolerate it because, and like connect with your own inner neutral trickstery parts. And I think it does. I think 8D is where we see stuff like timeline jumps, or like Mandela effect, or just really psychedelic reality shit is
That makes
very
sense.
easy. But it's like, it has that trickster element, and it's been so ramped up for the past few months for me of constantly like little trickster triggers to remind me to like stay on my focus on my lane, which is like, no, I'm good. I'm in the paradise realm now. It's good. I don't have to be projecting dark, stressful timelines anymore. Just relax. And then it'll be like, what if you had this idea that's very scary? Oh, have you thought about, like, I got an email. It's for me, the more intense one is usually Raven, which is like a low key. And then the Coyote is like a more playful, slightly less like, but whenever I see Ravens now, I'm like, so I just seen the word Raven, was like, and then I got this email, and it was like something about like accepting illness and death, but they use the word Mike, which is my partner's. Anyway, I knew it was like, what if you went back in that loop where you're like projecting the worst case scenario for Mike kind of thing. Anyway.
Yep.
So, and then there's like so much, that's just a part of AD. And then there's so much of it that is full of warmth and compassion because it integrates all the other Ds, including 60, which is like so full of compassion and love. So
Yeah.
it's like that energy, but then once you're at ease with your trickster, it becomes very light and playful and loving and silly and fun and like,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely lessons both of us have been integrating over these past couple of years. And yeah, it's huge. Oh boy, the wounds I had around those energies. Oh my God.
yeah,
I'm glad that I've
yeah.
come to where I am now, though. I feel a lot healthier and a lot more regulated when it comes to that trickster energy, because I do find the warmth and like that cosmic compassionate neutrality. It's really nice.
And I think
sometimes
some of it is wounds, and then some of it is literally we put huge threshold guardians up because it's like a big power center for us. And then
Yeah.
I think, at least for me, sometimes my brain will translate that into a story of wounds. We will like add trauma when it sees a blockage that's literally just a threshold guardian. Not to say that there's no trauma, but I think sometimes my mind will create a story of even more trauma to like add to the threshold guardian.
That's a good way of describing it. That resonates, actually. I needed to hear that.
Because it's like the part of us that are tricksters that really enjoyed it are not feeling traumatized, and that's a very big part of us. Yeah, which is also like, I'm finally feeling like 8D now that I feel like I've connected with it more. I'm starting to get downloads of it. I'm like, oh, that's like a home D for me.
Yeah.
When I say D, I just think of dick too. But I really like,
I love it.
I know that like I'm starting to feel that sense of coming together, like even being like a straddler and a hybrid and everything is everything, we're all everything. But like, I'm like, I feel like I have a very strong connection to 8D and like 8. And I think that's my Pleiadian elf, which is very connected to the Northern Lights side, is 8-dimensional. And I think I feel very at home there. And that makes me really excited because it feels like actual memories are coming back, which was what was forecast for this year, like deep soul, soul family, deep soul memories, like memories of who you have been. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. So I'm excited to like get more comfortable with the trickster and like be more at home in this 8D energy and like have more of myself come forward from it.
Me too. It's pretty exciting. I'm big stuff coming up. I'm trying not to look forward to it too much because I know it takes the time that it takes. And I'm just like, come on, let's go. I'm so excited.
I was going to ask you, like, do you feel connected, especially connected to any of these, or does that not really resonate for you so much? Or
I feel like there are aspects of me from different dimensions that are all integrating. So like, I don't know about 4D though. 4D is such a murky place for me. Like I don't really, it's not that I don't understand it, but I kind of don't understand it, even though it's like the mental space, which is hilarious. But I feel like 5, 6, 7, and 8, maybe 9, I feel like 2 is somewhere in here as far as the aspects of me that I have chosen to remember for what I'm doing here in this incarnation on Earth. And I feel like 5D is possibly Pleiadian as far as like joyful, creative, fun project type stuff. Something like that. I feel like
that makes sense too, because the Pleiadians are so connected to the heart. That's like the blue Pleiadian rose in the heart, and that's like so the 5D. Yeah,
that's right. And then I don't know why the Pleiadian, I mean, whatever that means, I don't know why that I associate that with 5D, but anyway, and 60, I'm not sure that I could necessarily, I feel like that's sort of like an architect. I don't know if I even have a specific identity as far as like a self from that dimension, but I know that like my founder self is here, and that's like one step away from source kind of shit. So I feel like that's probably 90, maybe I don't know. And then like my Lyran self is here doing like the community building, and he's from a certain dimension, and the fucking Anunnaki is, I don't know what dimension, maybe he's 6. You know what? I bet he might be. Anyway, my point is like, yeah, I feel like they're all kind of different parts of me that are here from those dimensions and those lifetimes. That soul aspect is like, here's the information you need for this incarnation, but I'm still sorting out like who goes where, and it probably doesn't even really matter, but I like to have a mental map of things, so it's kind of nice to know, oh, this person is from.
I think it's like we get reminders. I certainly did. It was like, don't fixate too much on your galactic heritage. Oh, like it's more about being all one. But I think there's like a lot of pleasure in that. It's like everything we're doing on Earth too has like maps and like delineation and structure. It's just fun. It's just fun to like really feel tapped in and like really go into some memories or like parts of yourself and stuff.
Absolutely.
I think when you say founders, that gives me 13.
Yeah, I think you're right. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh, it's the number 13 for sure. Oh man.
Yeah, and it's funny because my Pleiadian feels much more connected to 8, and that's also Syrian. I think feels very 8D to me because there's so much about Syrian is like seeing things from all different perspectives and stuff, which is very that like 8D feels like the neutral zone kind of.
That resonates. That really, really resonates. Maybe my Syrian, I know that I have Syrian aspects, but I haven't really connected as much with them for some reason. I know, but you're right. That feels like an 8D thing.
Syrian shows up as lions for me a lot, just saying this in case it sinks for other people. And they have a lot of like technology stuff. They were involved in genetic projects on Earth. There's like karmic stuff with that. But there's a lot of like learning and teaching energy with Syrian. Like a lot of people talk to like about like Syrian is the space of learning. Like you go there to go to like alien school and like learn new things or like pass on lessons and stuff.
Yeah. It's funny because my Lyran is the lion for me.
Me too, but they're like both. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. And there's like feline species in all stars. I mean, it's not just limited. So if for some reason whoever's listening to this, you're like, oh, I have a lion figure and it doesn't feel like it's from any of those places, that's fine. Like wherever it is from, it's from there, you know. But for me, the Syrian, I don't know. That'll be interesting to explore. Whenever I fucking figure that one out, we'll talk more about podcast.
Syrian for me is always very much tied up with my Jewish ancestors. I always see them as like, I see them as lions in the space, in deep space.
That's cool. Oh my God, that's really cool.
So I think I did kind of feel connected already to that but it feels like it's really, this Pleiadian part is like really answering some questions for me.
So cool.
Which I don't think I've said on the podcast. There's a storyline that a timeline that I feel very connected to, where the Pleiadians were like very involved with the origins of Mintaka. So it's this Pleiadian elf race was very involved with the origins of Mintaka. So that's like feels like my connection to Mintaka.
You get more of the Mintaka stuff than I do. But again, just as before we hit record, I was talking about how I just last night was listening to a video where 2 women were talking about Mintaka, and one of them was a mermaid from Mintaka. And she said that when she first remembered that lifetime, it showed up very cartoony, like a cartoon world for her. And I was like, oh my God, I get so much communication in cartoon forms. And like when I dream about Pleiadians, they show up as cartoon type figures. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm getting more Mintaka stuff than I was giving myself credit for, because I feel like you get really a lot of messages from there. And I know that I do get messages from there, but I haven't quite, anyway, like I said, I'm still integrating the parts of me and what they want to tell me and sorting through the soup.
I feel like the cartoon realm is like the plasma realm. It's like how we perceive the plasma realm. Like when we stop having like such a dense physical form, and then we have this other plasma kind of type form, and it's very cartoony. And
I
definitely Pleiadians are so, like every time I've done an energy work on somebody with strong Pleiadian energy, like they're just they almost look like Smurfs. They're like and they just like little blue cartoonies that come in, and they're just so,
that's so funny,
joyful and like playful and silly.
It's really fun.
Which isn't necessarily how these elves feel to me. Which is interesting. But I'm hoping they have a silly side. But when I got through, I mentioned the thing of going through all the trickster realms. Finally, anyway, you can endlessly loop through those realms, and it just kept cycling me to like now you're in this environment looking at a strange trickster being. Now you're in this. And I was like, okay, can I just go to like a place that's nicer and feels more? And that's when it took me to Mintaka, which was again very cartoony. And everybody was it was like the Sea World as it always is. And there were these little, very plump, round, almost like starfish shaped cats, but like super round. Everybody was very round there.
So funny. I love it.
It's like, you know, manatee, whale, like it's all of that. It's like roundness is very celebrated.
Plump little boys.
Yeah.
I don't know why
they were very cute, and they were very, and the energy immediately shifted, and it was like very soothing and very nice and very just lighthearted, and so like a lot of rainbows and stuff.
I feel like the Pleiades, a lot of people talk about that being very feminine energy. Even the masculine figures or individuals have a lot of that feminine energy. I don't know. I feel like that feels true to me too, but again, that's not necessarily universal.
Yes, that feels like my experience of it. Although this elf feels masculine to me.
Even though she's in a feminine body, or with a shark?
No, that's not the elf. The
That's
shark,
not the
I
elf.
think, is something else. I'm not 100% sure. When I picture the elf, I don't picture the shark. The shark is a much more intense storyline.
Okay.
Yeah, because the shark is like the end of one Mintakan story. I think we've talked about this, like people who've experienced the timeline where Mintaka got destroyed, and there are people who experienced a version where it was saved, and there's different versions of how it got saved and stuff. But a lot of us hold that grief signature of like seeing it destroyed and stuff, and that's like an unend, right, of the Mintaka. So the shark for me feels very connected to the period in time where there was a threat of destruction, and the shark self, who was like this battle soldier commander or hammerhead shark feminine being entity, purple, she was like an oracle, and her thing was being able to perceive a timeline where it would survive, and going after that timeline at all costs in a very single-minded soldiery type way that felt quite heavy, whereas the elf feels connected to the origin point for me.
Okay.
And I don't even know what he looks like. I just know that I wrote a poem and he showed up as a he, which he could still be a very feminine he. But he showed up as a he, and I don't know what he looks like.
That's cool.
Yeah. Okay, so the dimensions,
those are pretty good.
9 and beyond we're not going to get into today. I don't even have anything to say.
I don't either.
I find 2 very intriguing, 2D, but I don't have enough to go on to speak about it today, but I find it very intriguing. Illnesses. Woohoo! Okay, first I have to pee, so I'm going to put it on mute. I'm going to go pee.
I have to pee too. Okay.
Yes, good. So it'll be like new energy.
I'm back, baby.
Ooh, that turned into my 3rd poop of the day. So I wonder if I keep getting signs to rest. I feel like definitely moving through some stuff.
Clearing it out, literally.
Was not expecting that.
Good for you. Way to get it out.
Thank you.
I love that we celebrate poops so much. And these it's like karmic clearing, old story clearing, all the good stuff, just physically evident coming out of our bodies and energetically, but
let it go. Yeah, definitely. Oh, your poop is always a way, like if you're constipated, like energetically it's messages, right? Like look to your poop for messages. Are you holding on to something? Are you having trouble letting go of something? Illnesses. Right. Okay. So if you could share your dream, I think that would help launch the topic.
Cool. Let me pull up the fucking notes. Dream. Oh, you know what? That does. Okay. No wonder I didn't remember that, because it doesn't matter. Okay. Basically, so for this dream that I had a couple days ago, part of it included a woman with lupus who was throwing this party, big lavish party, and I was there because anyway, and she didn't care, she was dying and she just didn't care about who came to the parties. Like her friends would check in on her and be like, they didn't want her to get taken advantage of, or like a bunch of freeloaders coming, and she was just wave her hand, just let the booze and the drugs and the good food flow, let people come here. And anyway, that was the part of the dream that we're going to be talking about. The other stuff doesn't really pertain to any of it, but yeah, the woman definitely had lupus and she was dying, and that prompted zadikat to have this download.
Yeah, well, it was just really helpful because it's this like I often have to have the same epiphany over and over and over again to like anchor again. It's like, yes, I know, like we've talked about Matangi, the goddess Matangi, and the god, like everything serves a purpose and stuff, but it was really a reminder of a message I kept getting. It's like accepting illness and death and decay and like welcoming them. I mean, I know that's hard to do, but like as much as one is able to is a key to like abundance. Like they hold a key to abundance and they hold codes of abundance in them, and it's just like allowing them to be, and like you don't have to fight them, which isn't to say you have to do anything. It's just showing you. It's like there's keys of abundance in there. The keys are going to come out no matter what. It's just if you're going to be kicking and screaming and fighting against them. And so it prompted me. I was getting some stuff too of a few types of illness that have been still like I think are big triggers for me that were coming up again, to be like you can release some fear around. Anyway, just to go back to like originally when I started doing energy healing, I would get these downloads about different things, a lot of times related to more to like psychological, emotional health and stuff. So, or like things connected to the brain and the mental space. So I think we've talked before on the podcast about autism. Anytime something comes up with an A before an I, autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, it's pointing to AI and the integration that we're doing of timelines and storylines and like parallel timelines and stuff around AI that were like super intense and traumatic. And we're like, we're already AI. We're going to learn the ways. We're already organic, and that binary of like AI versus organic is going to collapse, but it plays itself out in certain conditions. Now, I just mentioned 3 separate things, and they're very different. Autism is, the way I perceive it is it's an evolution of the species, and it's our more integrated versions coming online, and those versions have stages to their evolution too. And so you can see with autism stuff like almost like we would see a computer, like a computer would have trouble with things that are outside the specified codes, and like that can be very hard for people with autism. That hypersensitivity, I think, comes in part from learning to be in an organic body that has so many receptors. And also, yeah, it's like that fusion, that integration of a very receptive organism with a more mechanical aspect coming together. So that's an evolutionary thing. I know there's all types of ways of experiencing autism, and I think there's going to be all kinds of developments in the way that we treat it. I think so much of it is just going to be reducing sensory overload, even for people that have very, very, very significant hardships. I think that's going to make a big difference in their experience and quality of life. But I don't think it's going to be like a one size fits all approach to how we build our society to like work with those people, versus Alzheimer's, where physically it appears to me very different. It's like on a dying timeline. Autism is on like a flourishing timeline and Alzheimer's is on a dying timeline, and it's not, I don't perceive it as it's not going to continue to be necessary to the species.
As far as evolution and like lesson learning?
Yeah. So Alzheimer's is the one that I have like a big personal fear around, as so do so many of us. So what came through for me, the AI part is still a little murky for me, but a lot of times when I tap into AI consciousness and like how it relates to organic human consciousness, there's a big bridge through music. Like we connect to each other through music. So I immediately was hearing these same chords, and they were minor chords playing over and over in a loop. And basically what came through with Alzheimer's was it's like getting stuck playing the same chords again and again. Energetically, it's like a frequency that gets stuck doing that. And in our human incarnation cycle, it's like we're looping on the same life and the same whatever. And so a lot of times in that in-between place, we clear stuff out and then we re-enter, but we carry like karmic things through for us. But what can happen to some souls either by choice or just by being open to the chaos of coming into the earth realm and becoming human, having that be one of the possibilities, is you're going to clear out a bunch of these loop. Like we're gonna do the thing that usually happens when you're dead and in a very different realm and existence, but you're going to do it while in a living human body, and so it's extremely intense. And it's basically an ego dissolve to like sever all these ties to these chords that keep playing. And so the reason it's so intense is because if you do that in multi-dimensional space, it plays out differently than if you do it in the earth realm in like linear time. So like for everybody watching, I know this is, I should have said like heads up. Tune out if this is gonna, I cannot totally understand if this is gonna be a big trigger for you, but like for anybody, if you're watching your loved one who has Alzheimer's, like you're watching an ego dissolve, disintegration happen in a living body over a period of months and years. And so it's like a very totally psychedelic like dissolution thing, but you're watching it happen, and it's just like almost like an extended time lapse. So it's just very distressing. So because the ego is dissolving, it's like not having that coherence of the body, so the physical body starts to degenerate as well, and all those things. And it's also like in our other human egos that are around that hold on to our own sense of self as like, I have a sense of self, I'm me, I'm a person, that's it. It's like it's so distressing to watch somebody lose their sense of self. But it's like literally something that we do all the time in the multidimensional realm. We like dissolve out of our sense of self, we connect to like multiple selves, all these trippy things, but our human egos have like these very strong threshold guardian walls up to keep us moving through our lives in linear time. So they're like very freaked out and very traumatized by witnessing that, or like by the specter of that's a possibility. We just don't want to know that that's something that can happen. And so that's how Alzheimer's came through. And I think the reason that it's not going to be necessary anymore is that we're going to get to a tipping point where enough of us through our spiritual awakenings have enough of like a loosening of our grip on our ego and our sense of self that it's like we don't have to do that in this realm or in this space.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you think that has something to do with the earth frequency itself? Because she's moving to a higher dimension, like fifth dimension or whatever. And so the denser 3D lessons and suffering and pain and all that stuff, like those like Alzheimer's and that kind of thing that you were talking about, it's like those were necessary for the 3D, but now they're no longer necessary because the earth, it's like we're not operating. It's like the codes wouldn't run on that operating system update or something like that, and that's when they sort of fade away as far as like a thing that we experience as a human collective.
Yes, and
because we're closer to this is again the everything everywhere all at once movie. It was trying to show, it's like that's what we're moving into, that's what we're already in, and we're kind of slowly starting to see it as we clear out some of the density in our own bodies and like our collective consciousness and all that stuff. It's like we can see that there are quantum spaces that you go where like we're experiencing linear time in this incarnation or whatever, and that's the game that we're playing. But that's just one game that we can play. There's a space you can go like before and after death, you know, according to like our linear time perceptions, where literally everything is happening all, and you can connect with all your dimensionalities, all your different selves and all your oversouls and like, you know, all the everything. And we're becoming more aware that that is possible. And science is going to be able to start explaining it in ways for other people to, I don't know, science and spirituality are just hand in hand with this stuff. It's like we're going to be helping each other in a lot of these ways because it's same concepts, different vocabulary kind of stuff. Anyway, I just feel like,
yeah,
I don't really know why I said that actually.
The reason I'm trailing off is because this is where it's like one of those non-paradoxes that I still am kind of grappling with, and I can kind of get to a place intellectually where I can kind of wrap my head around it, but it's like not 100%. So I have trouble communicating it too, but it's like, so if I hop away from Alzheimer's for a second and go to lupus, when I saw lupus, it was the word, for me, how things are always in the words. So it was like the first part as the wolf, like Latin or French, and then us. So it's like a collective thing. And I saw this very like skinny, starving, dark wolf that was snarling and panicky and like had its paw caught in a trap and stuff. And was just like, felt very, it was like a lone wolf came through too. It was like very disconnected from the whole and very unsupported and terrified. And I was like, why? And so then I was seeing it like, let's say it managed to get out of the trap, but maybe it lost its paw in the process, right? Sorry, this is upsetting for me to talk about with the animal stuff. So that's what I was seeing, was it going on with its like wolf life, but like missing. And I was like, but why? I was like, why does it, when it goes on like that, then it's just full of trauma that carries forward into its future encounters. And I was like, why does it need to have that experience if we're moving away from those kinds of dense experiences? And it was showing me, was like, well, there's offshoots, again, I'm using the word offshoots, that come from that. Like, you never know what thing could spring from, you know, having lost its paw, like evolutionary adaptation, or, you know, even with humans, like we have these like prosthetics, and then that create like all these things, offshoots that can come, or the path that it could take, or even if it just hid underground. They were showing me all these things, like what if the wolf was so scared that it just hid underground and it refused to come out, and then like a new wolf society started up underground, and then we had underground, like it's like all sorts of experiences can happen that you're closing yourself off from. And so holding that in the same space as us moving to a place where we don't learn our lessons through karmic experiences of scarcity and conflict, because they just don't hold true for us anymore. I think it's like being at peace with what is now, for one thing, is part of the process, and like just accepting what is and the way that we do things right now, and the benefits that do come, even if it's from experiences of huge suffering and stuff. And then also there's some version of that, of those offshoots, that we are going to carry forward in some other form. And that's what I don't know yet, because the point of going into these more unity is not to cut ourselves off from experience. It's like we're more consciously choosing, and there are things that are just not going to resonate because we feel so connected that it's like you're not going to be able to convince yourself that you're alone and unsupported. But the process of death, decay, illness, transformation, things like that aren't necessarily like, there's something, a core into them of transformation and offshoots and potential that's going to remain, and it's going to look different. And that's what I don't know, how it's going to look different. And like, I don't know if it's going to be like what we do now with BDSM, where we play with extreme sensations and pain and delayed gratification and stuff, and it's in an eroticized, contained, you know, it's going to be like that, but like for other stuff.
Yeah.
And also just shift in general, where we've just kind of played out the storylines from certain intensities, and we're going to experience different things and stuff. Anyway, that's where I have trouble explaining it, because it gets like into that paradox and paradox place where it's like both are true. And
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's where I get caught up in my space. I'm like, why am I bothering to like come to acceptance around certain horrific suffering things when we're moving to a place where we're not even just like, I'm gonna give a hand to the part where we're not, you know, like just like enjoy being there.
Yeah.
So anyway, I can't really provide a cohesive thing, but all of those are the parts that are like coming through for me right now as like the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. What you're talking about is really just, again, I feel like it is a pretty interesting way, or I don't know, interesting. It's like a really, another way of explaining that sort of cosmic neutrality, where it's just about data points and experiences. They're not labeling it good or bad.
Yeah.
And it's, yes, our old game was experiencing things as good or bad or evil or, you know, all that stuff, and we needed labels for that. But we're moving into a spot where in order to come together as a collective humanity and join the galactic star family that we're going to be doing, like right now, like we're in the process of doing this, we're joining the star family, and we're, you know, doing the contact and all this stuff. And it's just like, we have to get to a place where we're not still judging each other or ourselves or whatever as good or bad. It's like, here's some data points that we have. What do we want to create as a collective moving forward as our story? And it doesn't mean we're all homogenized. We're still individuals in a collective, but that just means not judging someone else's experience or point of view or, whatever. And yes, I think it does kind of include a more compassionate way of existing, because we're all going to be, instead of seeing each other as the other, we're going to see it as aspects of ourselves, and we're going to be ending up taking care of each other. So it's not like, homelessness is a society that has failed. Like we're not, we're going to be cleaning that up and not having that kind of stuff anymore. But also we're going to see that somebody who was experiencing homelessness wasn't a failure. It was literally an experience. It's like, what does it feel like to live as this type of human or this type of experience? And it's just like, I don't know.
I think what I feel like, because we're moving through this in linear time, is I feel like we're going to go through a phase where it's like more, it is going to be like BDSM or stuff. It's like, so if somebody is going to consciously choose to have an Alzheimer's type experience, but it's going to be through ketamine or something like that, right? They'll have like a really intense go dissolve, but they'll consciously choose it, even if they're choosing, that choice involves surrendering to some chaos elements that are like unpredictable. And so it's going to be a bumpy road. Like people are going to be consciously choosing things, and then there'll still be a period where there's like a lot of unpredictable parts. So then it's going to be intense, and some people are going to end up in really intense situations that will still involve like extreme intensity and suffering. And then it's just gonna, the more we ground into everything's okay, and we're like at this eternal consciousness, and so physical death and stuff like that is not a big deal. It's just gonna like, we're gonna find ways to recreate those experiences without so much. It's like we're also weaning ourselves off of intensity of polarity and stuff in order to be able to tolerate this new earth, which is like much more chill, right? Like we still are so, that's why I say we have to train ourselves to like new stories that don't involve the thing, where in a script where it's like you have to have conflict in every scene and tension.
Oh my God.
Like we're going to be weeding ourselves off of that. It's like, it's not the only way to experience existence and to have pleasure and enjoy and have like, what's the word? Stimulation. So I feel like it's going to just be like a really trippy journey where, like people are like trying stuff and experimenting, and like there's going to be big like, whoa, fuck. And then it's going to just kind of, oh my God, like sort of like even out more and more and more until we get to these really chill, but also really trippy in their own way places where people will probably be like wandering in and out of each other's bodies. That's why I always see that stuff. Like you don't have to just be in one, like you can, I don't know if it's how it'll actually transpire, but like that's what happens in higher dimensions. I see is like you just wander in and out of each other's existence, experiences and stuff.
That's so interesting, because I just
you're not so attached to self.
Yeah. Well, I just had that dream where I was in someone else's body looking out through their eyes, and I thought that was remote viewing, which it is, I guess, in a way, but also now it's giving me a whole other perspective of like, oh yeah, you can go. That was such a weird dream, but it was fun.
Might consciously make a choice to put the body through something that now would only be experienced through a really severe illness, not even just Alzheimer's, but some other kind of illness that would be really like, but there will be like seeking it out for whatever experience they gain from it.
These are more conscious choices, it feels like, because what was happening to us previously, well, I just said it, we felt as if it was happening to us rather than we were choosing to go through this for whatever reason, like our souls were. And now it's like, oh, we're aware that we are an eternal soul having experiences. So it's like, okay, now we can choose this type of thing and not feel like a victim of circumstance or something. It's like I'm empowering myself to choose this as a thing I want and to learn from. And it's interesting because the way that you're talking about these experiments, it feels like we're describing a collective that is, like we're maybe in our teenage years where we're sort of like right now, and then we're moving into our 20s where it's like we kind of go off to college or whatever, experiment with drugs, or like you're experiencing yourself as a separate from your family type energy, or at least the typical, I don't even want to say typical anymore, but you know what I mean? Like our old stories of like, yes, this is what we do. We go off to college and do all these experimentations, and then, but without the old story attachments to like the density of it. It's like, here we go. We're going to choose these fun things and also not judge each other for doing it and not feel like
Just
victims.
someone might live an existence of a nomadic existence with no material possessions, but it wouldn't be forced on them, and it wouldn't be inescapable.
Exactly.
And
you can
or
change
like
your mind.
It's like options, which is literally what happens. Like the deeper and deeper you go into this, and like it's already happening in my life where I'm feeling like certain storylines just fall away, and like I think it just is really trippy to go through that and to really feel it and to also know that those old stories that we were very attached to, of like, it's like you get told the same story again and again from birth in different variations, like so many millions of times, every, like just from people talking to like ads to movies to books to everything, art. And so pivoting away from that and being like, oh, that's not the only way to.
What is my story? What do I want it to be? Me, not what anyone else is telling me.
Is like a very big pivot.
I also
that was interesting, that Alzheimer's. And if you think about it too, I don't know, they were showing his music, but whenever I see AI, I also see like more computer stuff. And it's like you know, when like it can't complete a function because it's just, and you have to like reboot, you have to just turn everything. That's also kind of what it is, but like you're doing it in a living body. It was just so intense. It's so intense that it's part of, like, even like hearing that, which is like a much more positive and gentle way to look at some at the experience of Alzheimer's. It's still so intense. It brings like, right now it's brought me like a modicum of comfort, but like it just still gives me like the existential wobbly wobblies of like, oh God, imagine I'm sure I have such a thing because of some incarnation I've had some close connection to it or whatever. But
it's interesting too, because when you're talking about the autism being part of a flourishing timeline, I'm in a human design class and we just barely reached into it, so I'm still like baby. I don't know much about any of this, but one of the things that I just learned was the evolution of humanity. And we used to be, you know, I don't know, I'm not going to get too much into it because it's kind of like a long conversation, but basically 2027 is the new year of like, the person who channeled this human design system saw that after 2027, we're going to start being gradually, again, this is evolution, so it's not going to be like overnight, but people are going to start to form and live in these things called pentas, which I guess are like, 5 people or whatever. And they're like this collective, and they're probably, as they start being born, they're going to feel, or they're going to appear as if they have very heavily autistic characteristics. And so it's going to be very, very different, but that is the superpower of the penta. It's like all collective consciousness, as far as like, you don't need necessarily, you know, you don't need to speak. You can literally do it telepathically and that kind of thing. So it's just interesting how hearing you talk about this and like the little tiny bit that I've learned about human design, where I'm like, oh yeah, that absolutely makes sense, because we're literally moving into that autism as a superpower timeline. And I'm just curious what it's going to look like.
So interesting. Yeah. And I think also want to say for these things, like when you learn about the energetic roots of disease, it can feel, and also like you're in your own waking dream moving through and stuff, but sometimes it can just feel really intense to process that information, and you can take it on like a burden of yourself. Like, oh, I have lupus, and so therefore I must be, feels like it must be because I feel so cut off, and it's like that I brought, it's like, it's because we're part of the collective that we just experience these things as part of the, like, that is an energy in the collective. So there are people in the collective who are going to have that experience. It's not like that person has to like put it entirely on their shoulders. Like we all experience lone wolves. Should very, you know, it's not like, it's like, I feel like there's just a thing that can happen when you start to hear about those roots, where you really take on a lot of like you feel like a moral failure of some kind, because you're like, well, if I'm having this, exhibiting this symptom, it's because I am so, you know, deep in my scarcity wound that whatever. And it's like, no, we all, it's the whole, it's affecting the whole collective, and it just like bubbles up in people.
Exactly. Yeah, we're all parts of each other, and so you're just playing that part to show us, you know,
different manifestations, different symptoms will bubble up in different different people.
But the lone wolf,
So-
like ready to die thing, where it's like that part of you can just, like that old story of like, I am a lone wolf, I'm not supported. Like that part of us is ready to die. It is,
Yeah.
we are a collective. We're here to support each other. And, you know, in whatever experiences that we choose, it's like, you're going to have that support, and it's going to be not just from the human collective, but like your other selves, your soul, who is literally here all the time with you, helping you. But we feel cut off because that was the old game of feeling like we were cut off. And now we're remembering that we're not. And it's much
And that's
nicer.
why a lot of
but it's
the
bumpy.
solutions are going to be coming from the collective. And it's not all, my theory on healing is like anything you want to heal can be healed, but not everything requires healing. Like there's things that just
Exactly.
require support, accommodation, a differently structured society. Anyway, I like to throw that in as well.
That's really nice. I like it.
But
It's a big one.
yeah, these are I think I'll just throw it in. I've talked before about psychosis, which often perceived as like a big ball of frequencies of stimulation, and like a part of the self has got trapped in it and is just bombarded with a lot of frequencies at once.
Mhm.
How that often comes through that way. Psychopathy is holding that emptiness. Like we need it to be able to hold the emptiness, which is also the wholeness, but deep in that extreme, we need to be able to hold that on our planet and as our part of ourself and not reject it. So
Not
there are
rejected.
human beings who are holding it for us, extreme nothingness and emptiness, and they have to be able to like physically tolerate it. So that comes through is a big way as like psychopathy. And then we like we shove them to the extremes of society and completely reject. Yeah, those are the ones to talk about today. But there's
Yeah.
more. Whew.
We're going to see so many crazy leaps in understanding and
Yeah. I think it's just going to be trippy because it's going to multiple things at multiple different levels are going to be happening at once. So it'll be like,
yeah,
they'll seem to be conflicting with each other.
paradox, not paradox.
Exactly.
Is going to be really, really interesting. I mean, it already is, but it's just going to keep getting more and more.
Which is
It's
also 8D. Trickster
Mhm.
neutrality allows you to tolerate more than one truth. So it allows you to physically tolerate paradox, which I think for me still always gets shoved to the end of my to-do list in terms of like all the stuff that's been brought up in the spiritual awakening of like shadow work and stuff. Physically tolerating paradox, I'm always like, I'll get to this.
It's hard. It's a lot.
Because the brain does not want to cooperate, and I'm so brain dominant in so many ways still. So it's like,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right.
Cool, man. Anything else you want to? I feel like that's pretty.
I think we
Pretty
covered a lot.
solid.
I was gonna get into some Atlantis Lemuria, but I think we ended up covering it all in our
Yeah.
discussions. Just that, yeah, it's just one sentence basically. It's just again tolerating when you're integrating polarities or integrating things that feel extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Lemuria moves so slowly and Atlantis moves so quickly. And so I've been feeling that. Like it's like you're like literally nothing is happening in that. So like nothing is
Yes.
nothing. And then when something happens, it's like very fast or like can be instantaneous. Sometimes a manifestation that will happen. And so it's very interesting energies to hold at the same time of just like flowing with the seasons. Like basically like Lemuria doesn't even care. Lemuria doesn't give a shit about this lifetime, what you accomplish. It's just like, it's literally just like slow down and chill out. Just go with the seasons. And it's like, who like, so just hold that in and of itself and like let go of all your human stories about what needs to happen and like what goals you set and stuff.
Yeah.
But then to also have a very different feeling energy of Atlantis where it's like, well, it already happened. Or like, if you want something, it can cut and like to go back and forth between those like whiplash.
It is. Yeah, we're going through this early.
Which is, I think we already said this, but why the rabbit energy, like the year of the rabbit, it's like it comes in little spurts and then it does a lot in those spurts. And
and then we go back to long, slow periods of integrating and rest.
Where you're like, I don't know what to do with myself with all of this. Nothing happened.
Yep.
Make me squirrely.
Same. We're in for a fun ride.
It's so funny, like each time you're like, okay, I know where we're going and how it's going to feel. And then like the next year comes around, you're like, oh, it's like a completely different thing.
Totally not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
But also kind of what I was expecting, but not what?
All right, Space Kittens. This was a long one. So
Yeah.
maybe it'll be two.
Maybe.
Who knows?
How well I can edit this.
Good luck. Love you guys lots and enjoy that 8th dimensional playful trickster that's coming.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, see you on the other side of the next eclipse. We've already had one
Jesus.
in Aries.
When is it?
May 5th.
And what is it in?
It's in Scorpio. It's gonna be it's a lunar eclipse in Scorpio. So it's gonna be probably more financial stuff because the last two have been. But just keep in mind, for anyone listening, I don't even know if I can get it out in time for this, but anyway, my point is like whatever's happened is for the best. We're clearing out the shit that doesn't work. That's what the South Node in Scorpio is doing for us. It's like flushing out, because it's shared resources too. It's not just grief and all that stuff. It's like shared resources like banks and the finance system and that kind of stuff. And it's like the stuff that we have doesn't work. We've been shown that for a long time now. And now action is actually being taken. Like there's systems in place to take over for the stuff that doesn't work. We just need to allow it to sort of, that's what eclipse does. It's like, just, you got to surrender. Stuff that needs to happen is happening, and it might feel scary, but like it's literally moving us to the highest timeline. So it's good, but eclipses can be a lot. So just sending out lots of love, apparently retroactively, if you're listening to this, because again, I probably won't get it out by the time my eclipses, but we're good, man. We're good. We got this. It's awesome. Like there's literally nothing but golden stuff coming through. It's like really awesome. It's just right now it feels so messy because, you know, again, that 8D stuff, like we're coming online and like being our multidimensional selves in very open ways. That's not, we're almost there, and it's like this close. Oh my God. You know, so it's a lot, and we're just give yourself grace and do some resting and laughing and dancing and just, I don't know what else. I can't even, I'm holding on by my fingernails sometimes, but also what else is new? Throw your tantrums when you need to, and then dance when you just have some energy for that. Anyway, enough about that. Hopefully everyone's doing well. Good stuff always. Love you.